all good things must come to an end, and sadly, that's true for Series 1 of 99 Problems But Work Ain't One. But we couldn't just let it fizzle out, so we've compiled our favourite nuggets of knowledge from every episode. But before we get started on the best bits from Series 1, I wanted to say a big thank you to anyone who's tuned in, supported the show so far, and to our 13 amazing guests who've joined us for some really insightful and fascinating conversations. Each clip is time-stamped in the description with a note of the guest and episode number. So if you want to head over to any of the conversations you missed, you can. And if you want to get in touch, you'll find all the links you need in the description too. Lastly, we'll be back for a second series very soon, so make sure you've subscribed wherever you're listening. Here are the best bits from Series 1. So why don't you tell us what the sneaky fourth is, although I let the cat out.
A lot of the stuff I've been talking about is a little bit different. And most people I've talked about saying, well, that makes sense. Yeah, we should be doing that. But they don't. And one of the reasons they don't is they actually don't have a high level of credibility in the organization. So they have difficulty having a conversation saying, we need to change the way we do things. Now, and so therefore it is the credibility of L&D that will have a big impact on how well they're able to serve the organization effectively. And so that the fourth sneaky elephant to me is the brand and reputation, which are slightly different things, but they're correlated, is the brand and reputation of L&D. And in most organizations, it's not very good. Or it's not that it's bad necessarily, but it doesn't help them do what they need to do. And it certainly doesn't help them promote changes in the way learning is happening and promote changes to, as you said earlier, every culture has a learning culture, every organization. So, how can they start focusing on changing that culture? And that requires change. And the people that can generate change and trigger change best are those with good credibility. So that's one, L&D needs it. And so that's the fourth sneaky elephant.
And so what do you think, Paul, someone listening to this now, what are the immediate things they can do to essentially give L&D a rebrand or to create a learning brand within their organization?
Well, it's probably more than a brand. It's more than the logo. So there's a few steps that need to be taken somewhat iteratively there. One is to sit down and do a value proposition for L&D, and just like a marketing department would do for the products. What's our value proposition for product X or product Y? L&D needs to sit down and say, who's our audience and what is our value proposition for that audience? And there might be several different audience segments. And that's just a standard business process. There's lots of different value proposition sort of tools and models out there. So that's what they need to be doing to start with. And then once they've figured that out, they can say, okay, given that and our positioning in the organization, what is our mission, vision, purpose in L&D? And how do we link them to the greater vision, mission, purpose of the organization? So in a sense, our job is to ensure people are competent to step up to the line and execute the corporate strategy, whatever that is. So that's, we got to assume that's right. That's been handed down from on high. So if that's wrong, we're all kind of in the wrong boat, but hang on.
Yeah.
But let's assume that's right. So how do we as learning and development ensure that we have people competent to step up in the right kind of timeframes to deliver on that corporate and execute that corporate strategy? So that's it's kind of a roundabout answer, but there's the value proposition work, and then you've got to do your vision, mission, purpose and stuff for L&D and self, and then work out a strategy of how we're going to deliver that. And obviously all of that's got to be aligned with and plugged into the greater things that are going on at a business level.
So how would that break it down for me in terms of changing the structure of HR? Are we splitting it in a way where we've got kind of a HR person sitting in every function and is kind of tailoring the requirements to that particular part of the business? I guess that's what you try to do with the kind of a HR business partner, which is quite contentious. Some people like it, some people don't. But what does that actually look like in terms of a structure?
Yeah, so in quite a few organizations, they may have come from that legacy world, as you've said there, Nelson, of having someone who is that point of contact in the business that's maybe doing the generalist work and some of the strategic work, and then all of the admin work was within shared services. But if you automate more and more and more, which organizations are doing, and it's the right thing to do, with that balance of human, as I said, you then elevate the role that your legacy shared service kind of tier 1 type tier 2 resource could play, i.e. your advisors. So they can take on more activities, new services even, maybe like health and safety, for example, in some organizations. It could be that they're even, looking at owning the brand element of recruitment within shared services. I've seen that in some organizations. So if they're doing that, equally, there's the question of, with your business partners, that role should continue to be strategic, but therefore fewer in number. How do you keep that business line of sight and connectivity? And I think that's one of the challenges with the model of HR in a lot of organizations at the moment is you've got business partners, you've got shared services, and you've got COEs, and they may well all be doing brilliant things individually, but because they are individual teams, there is a propensity that they work in silos, and you lose that end-to-end line of sight of delivering the service to the customer and maintaining that business relationship. So for me, actually, it's not about really the roles you have and the structure of them. It's how do you create the networks and the connections and conversations that promote that listening and continuous improvement activity.
And how do you think this changes the skill requirements for people who are working within the people function? Because if it's changing their roles and responsibilities, how is it changing what a HR person should know or have in terms of skills?
Yeah, and this is a really hard one for me to answer, because I know one of the things on your quickfire questions, not to preempt it necessarily, was what was the one skill? And I'm like, there isn't just one. We've talked a lot in the past about thinking, particularly about business partners or people consultants, as I'd like to perhaps now reframe that role to, being much more data and insight savvy. That's a given in my opinion. Actually, when you think about what really matters to the majority of people in the organization from an experience standpoint, it's having someone who gets them, who will listen, and who will do the right thing. So that, I guess, comes down to kind of that emotional intelligence kind of mindset that you might have, or behavior that you might have. I think there's also elements around integrity. So doing the right thing, but also saying no more, which comes back to your first question, around, are we trying to be all things to all people? And integrity is a massive one for every part of the HR function, but particularly, I think, for business partners to be able to say no and to do that with justification and curious thinking. Yeah, that's a really interesting one too. Do you need process experts, or actually do you need more curious thinkers?
You had a great blog post, Ross, which was about how L&D can't do everything alone. What do you mean by that when you say L&D can't do everything alone? And who should L&D be working with?
Yeah, so with that, I think maybe people will understand where I'm coming from with this. I think there's a real generic bit in businesses where they think L&D or setting a training program or classroom program will solve any issue that a business has, whether that's from a cultural standpoint, lack of technological know-how, anything at all. And it's very much like, right, well, we'll train people up on this, like compliance is a prime example. We're going to send people something about, right, how to be security conscious at a business. This is how to do it. And people go to this session, they think, right, everyone must know now what they're doing, and that's going to be the end of it. Whereas actually that never happens. And that L&D solution that they think is going to change the world and means that everyone now understands how to be security conscious never happens. I've been doing this for 14 years, and not once have I ever seen any of that work at all in my career. I think realistically what it is they can't do everything because there are many parties involved. A lot of the work that we do is around behavior and culture. If you're trying to change behaviors, it takes buy-in from senior leadership to role model the right behaviors and that change. If you want to craft particular skills, you're going to need help from people, marketing and communication teams to help you with that. And I think L&D actually plays a far smaller part in this with the rest of the business. And it's about collaborating with the rest of the business to say, right, if we want to make this change, this is actually what we need to do. We need help from all quarters. It's not just going to be, let's push out an email that says, here's a new learning module that you need to complete, and then we do the box ticking exercise. It really is a business-wide effort to sit there and go, right, what is the problem that we have right now? And then what are the potential solutions to that? And And again, this may be controversial for people. 9 times out of 10, it's nothing to do with L&D. I've sat in many situations with, stakeholders and business leaders over the last kind of 14 years where I could clearly see it's not a L&D issue, but a mechanism of L&D is being used to try and solve an issue, which is not that. It's a far wider problem there. And I think that's where it falls down a lot, right? I think L&D gets a bad rap for that because they're asked to solve loads of problems, which is just, it's impossible for them because they need the rest of the business to do that. And it's not a one and done event. It really is if we want to make true and powerful change, it takes time and it takes lots of nudging. It takes lots of effort to do that. So yeah, for me, I'd say to those L&D professionals, you can't do it alone. You need to be working with other areas of the business to bring that on board and do it. So, do as much as you can to cultivate that environment and collaboration and showcase that.
A lot of organizations weren't really prepared for asynchronous working. So talk to me a bit about what are the challenges you faced by shifting to asynchronous working, and what are the benefits you found as a result of shifting to asynchronous working?
That's a very good question. I think the main challenge is to let people know that it's okay to not be connected 24/7, because that's the risk when you have people from all over the world on different time zones. Basically, you can work all day long because it never stops. You would see people like online on Slack, etc., etc. So you have to train your people that they do their working hours, and that's fine. If they receive a message on Slack or an email, that's fine. This email or this message can wait the following day. So it's just to make sure that people don't feel like the guilt of not answering right away. So we are trying to make sure that it's clear, and we want people to kind of disconnect from work, especially working from home. It's really hard sometimes just to divide your personal life and your working life. So we are pushing a message on Slacks and during meetings, etc. Please disconnect. Wait until tomorrow if you need to reply to someone. But luckily now we do have like great tools. We have Slack, we have Notions, a lot of things. Even Laure created some different time so people can jump in if they want to work together on a project. But if it's not working, they can work on another time zone, etc., etc. So it's just being okay with the fact that not everyone can work together at the same time. You have to be okay with the idea.
Right.
And it takes time.
And Kevin, do you still have like core working hours for everyone, or is it quite flexible in the sense that just get the work done? When you do it is up to you. How do you manage that?
Yeah, we are trying to switch that situation actually, because in the past, Livestorm was really proud and saying, okay, we are only doing 35 hours per week. That's the legal amount of working hours in France, which is really hard to do because 35 hours is not that much, especially in our tech world.
Yeah.
But yes, we have, now that we are everywhere in the world, we have to be more flexible, meaning that you don't have to be connected from 9 to 5. If you have to, I don't know, like do something personal during that time, that's okay, as long as you finish working on your project. So we are trying also to be more flexible on that, but we really try also to not get people to work too many hours as well, because I don't think it's great that people work too many hours. I think it's actually the opposite of what you're trying to access. You need to make sure that your people work right, just enough time, and they are doing great on their project. So it's a fine balance between being flexible, but also making sure that people don't like overdo stuff.
Ultimately, what we want Hundo to become is that bridge between educators and employers, so that we can start the conversation early with employers to say, even if you're like a scale up or a startup, it's like start thinking about your entry level talent, because if you want to achieve a diverse pool of talent across your whole of your business at every level, you have to start there. With things like, with Black Lives Matter, with, I was talking to Josh Akapo, it's like, young Black people are facing the equivalent levels of unemployment as when the Brixton riots were happening. This is a bad situation, and actually no young people are faring well. You can't mandate tick box quotas into businesses. Like, it won't work, and you can't sit in a committee talking about diversity. It's like you have to start it from the entry level, because then in 3 years' time you will have a kind of consistent pool of diverse candidates coming through, and that's really our sweet spot. We're sort of going, work with us now. We can help you build a comprehensive entry-level talent program and solution that is going to achieve the diversity that you want within your business. And that's different for different businesses, So like for gaming, massive gender diversity issues, banking, just diversity issues like at every level, so and it's kind of going, so there's no, we're really aware that there's no one size fits all, but what we do with employers, the first thing we do is we put them through a two-step process, which is, the first bit is a scorecard, which is basically they submit all of their early talent collateral, and then we send that to young people, to Gen Z to go, do you understand what this business does? Would you work there? Do you even think you could work there? And we start there, and from that feedback and those insights, we then build the employer launch pads, on the Hundo platform, and then young people and employers can start interacting, because career discovery, even knowing what jobs are out there, is a barrier.
On the idea of kind of displaying your true self or showing your true self, it really reminds me of a recent conversation I had with a friend who got a new job, and he was asking me, is it okay to add your colleagues on Facebook? Is that allowed? That line of, do you follow the people you work with on Instagram? Should I be adding my manager on Facebook? And you might think after a year of a pandemic that we're far beyond that. We've got a lot more insight into each other's lives, but it's still a thing, right? Because really, what you're asking, it's a manifestation of the idea of, do I really want to be showing them what I'm doing outside of work? Right? This I've got a work persona, and do I want you to know anything else?
To the whole, you're at the office, and you're at home. I mean, I live in the Netherlands, and typically the Dutch are. I mean, I'm born and bred Londoner, so I'm used to like going out with your colleagues on a Friday night. For my bachelor party, most of my people were either current workmates or post workmates.
Right.
Whereas my wife, who's Dutch, she's like, couldn't think of anything worse than bringing my colleagues to my bachelor night. And there is very stereotypically, at least in Dutch, it's a very separated. You leave work at 5. That's it. I'm gone. You're great friends with that work, but weekends, I'm gone. Or Friday night, I'm out of here. And some things you just can't fight if you're in that culture. That's just the way things are. But little things like I said, I'm not a big Facebook fan, but LinkedIn, 100% is to share your, open up your profile, kind of connect with your manager, with your colleagues. Kind of show them who you are, because if you can't show them that, then how can you really succeed as a team? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but seems like there is a connect there.
And what do you think is the case for still having this kind of shared physical space, right? Because one of the options being considered is the complete opposite extreme, which is work from anywhere, but in essence what we're saying is you work from home or anywhere other than a shared physical space or office that that the business owns or the business is leasing out. So what do you think is the counter case for that? Why do you need a shared physical space?
So it's a really, really interesting question. So we ran a survey back in September last year, which surveyed over 1,000 employees of mostly small, medium-sized businesses across the UK. My favorite stat from that survey, and there was hundreds of stats, my favorite stat was 70% of people found working from home a positive experience, but also exactly 70% of people still wanted an office of some sort.
Right.
And when you dug in deeper as to why that was, it was really summarized by what we are now starting to call internally at Hubble the 3 C's, which are collaboration. So whilst people can collaborate online using remote tools, and there's plenty that we've been doing for the past 12 months, people prefer generally to collaborate in person. Fundamentally, we're humans. We know that 70% of communication is nonverbal. And so really via Zoom call, you're only sometimes getting 30% of that communication. Right. And collaboration between colleagues, a lot of the time, is based upon bonds, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of having a trusted space. And a lot of collaboration happens in between the workshops. So if you're running a workshop, that's kind of stimulated everyone's brains, and then they all go off for lunch, and they actually may have their best ideas over lunch. Yeah. And then they'll come back, and then actually they'll change everything. So the 3 C's were really collaboration, culture, and clients. And that's kind of what we see consistently from an individual perspective, a team perspective, and an organization perspective, is why people still want to come into physical spaces. So collaboration, either with the rest of your team. Second is culture. So again, we're tribal beings. We're still human. We can build culture online and remotely. But if you think about online dating, there's been a lot of online dating that's been happening for the last 12 months. So people are doing like FaceTime calls and Zoom calls, but you can't really date someone until you've met them in person, right? Like that's fundamentally true. Yeah. And lots of people have pen pals and remote friends, but they know that one time of year where they get together wherever they are, they'll always remember that as a memorable experience, and they'll form like a real human bond, because we're fundamentally just animals, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I think again, from an organization, individual perspective, culture of the business, I don't think that requires everyone being in Monday to Friday 9 to 5, but it does require having rituals and occasions where people do get together and form those bonds within the company. And the third thing is really clients. And again, it goes back to, how do you win a client or a customer? Typically, you win them by building trust. And of course, you can build trust online via documents, Zoom calls, etc. But some people prefer to build that trust over a lunch or a drink or a breakfast. And we're starting to see more and more companies want to meet clients in person if they can, whenever the restrictions lift, and that will be their first preference. Even though there'll probably be more remote client meetings than there ever were before in a post-COVID world, I think people will still want to meet in person if they can, to kind of get that deal over the line. And there is also, I think, will be a bit of an arms race, where if you're trying to secure a client deal, your competitor is taking them out for lunch and you're waiting to schedule a Zoom call. Your product may objectively be better, your company may objectively be better, but that's a human being make a decision based on human contact. You may or may not lose that client to the person who took them out for lunch. I'm not saying people are as fickle as that. I'm not saying people can be bought by lunch. What I'm saying is that people tend to want to do business with people who they have a good relationship with, and you can accelerate the relationship building in person versus doing that remotely 100% of the time.
I often find when you're going from startup to scale up, like you said, the culture is organic, right? And often founder-led, or the early employees who've been there, and it hasn't necessarily been codified, but it's just it's people are just absorbing it just by being around each other and the way they work. And now, how do you go about codifying this and scaling culture? What are the challenges, and how do you what's your approach to scaling that?
Yeah, so I guess that is one key challenge for sure. And both had mentioned me and Anna Elder, I was really lucky in the sense that the brand team had already been working on a rebranding project. So with that came work on the values, on reworking those values. So really, a few months after I joined, we had four sentences, like four values, more or less formed. And so then what follows is, well, okay, what does that mean truly? Like, how do we tie everything together to those words? And so that's the work that we're in the process. We're starting now, which is, okay, let's develop those behaviors. Let's define those behaviors. But have the employees, have the teams work on these themselves. So we're going to have some focus groups. so that we can have them live. And somebody in one of our all hands who had just joined said, I just love the culture. If if you could just bottle it up and sell it, then you'd be so rich. Yeah, it was great, but what is it? Like, what actually do we need to know? And so that's what we're starting now. And then once we have that, we'll then embed it in, it'll be very much at the forefront. People will understand what that actually truly means, what they expect to see, not just internally, but people outside of the organization will look at in their interactions and say, okay, this is what Elder is about, and this is what the culture is about. So that's what, and that's really codifying that in an even more challenging time for Elder, because we have an evolution in parallel that's going on, which is really moving from an introduction agency to a managed service. And so that's another topic altogether in itself. So just generally as a business, it's that growth and that evolution of that culture, but then it's also that business changing and scaling. And so for me, you keep the nugget of what got us there by defining what will take us forward, but acknowledging, celebrating that history. So that's a piece of work that we need to do too, is really to acknowledge and be very purposeful about what got Elder to where it is today, and all the work and the history from everybody that's put that together, celebrating that, and then this is what will get us to where we want to be. And then you have clarity around, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Is this the right journey for me, or is it not? Have I done my time here? And once, if you have clarity, then you stay or you leave the ship, right? But at least you know.
For us, the big thing that we had to start realizing is, and we have to take a needs. In the end, our client is the learner. And so we have to know them better, and we have to look at them, if you candidly, almost like a marketer for Nike or for looks at how do I sell a product? And they don't say, I'm going to go out and force them to buy sneakers because we've got these 5 sneakers. We do great. And even if they want a different sneaker, no. We're going to make them use these 5 sneakers and figure out how to want them to use the 5. No one does that. No business survives in that world. And that's what we do. We've taught our stakeholders to come to us and say these words. I would like 5 days of training on blah, blah, blah. Right. And so 2 things have to change. Number 1, we have to pivot on apply first, not new and more. We have to, I always challenge IDs that go through our course and come to us to learn it and say, look, you have to stop. You have to say, look, how do I understand the workflow first, and then build for the moment of apply, change and solve as best I can, and listen to this and do as minimal amount of training as a part of that deliverable. There's always training. I want, and this is where Con and I, Nelson, sometimes are misunderstood. We are not bashers of the classroom. Our concern is that, and again, in our journey too, it has carried too much burden, and we lead with it. We that's why, again, we got in trouble by numbering the moments. Right. Because when you number something, it puts it in order, and it also gives it a priority. Right. So moments 1 and 2 were new and more, and really the moment 1 is apply.
And just on that, Bob, I really like that idea of, and I'm glad you're clarifying that around. This is not the death of the classroom, or you're trying to get rid of the classroom. No. And I think often that's the misunderstanding, because it's using the classroom absolutely when it's necessary, where that is the right channel for delivering, or for getting that across. And some people learn better in the classroom, right? So it's
and that's what's been so unfair to the classroom for years. I always say, look, the 5 moments doesn't bash the classroom. The 5 moments saves the classroom. How's that? Right. And so organization, we call it targeted learning, not that we, of course, have to give it some name, right? Because classroom for too long, we overteach. I don't know any L&D professional, if you put them in a room quietly and say, look, do we overteach in the classroom? They're like, oh yeah. Do we cover too much stuff? Yeah. Are they too long? Yep. Do we put people in rooms, classrooms for oh yeah. Do we do cognitive overload? Yep. I mean, all the answers to all those questions are yes. But if you're a one-hit wonder, what else are you going to do, right? So the classroom needs to be freed to do what it does best, right? And that is analysis, group experience, trial and error, coaching and mentoring, remediation, safe failure. These are remarkable things in learning, but cramming 50,000 PowerPoints and schooling something up, just dumping all the stuff and people that they, and again, I know, yeah, we practice in there. I'm not saying we don't do those things. It's not that it's not engaging, but my point is that those are new and more designs, not apply design.
So, Kevin, what should L&D be measuring?
Wow, Nelson. So here's how I think about measurement, right? Because I'm always thinking about impact. And my belief is that impact is what you define it as, right? So I just want to let that marinate in a little bit, right? So again, impact is what you define it as. If you don't define it, it's going to be very difficult to measure. So what that means for me is first you have to explicitly describe what you're trying to measure. And I believe that impact measurement falls into three categories. I believe that there is operational efficiency, there is learning effectiveness, and then there's business and performance outcomes, right? So that's how I define impact in those three ways. So with operational efficiency, I'm going to measure the extent to which the way that training and learning is operating as a function is successful in what it's doing.
Right.
So when we talk about operational efficiency, it's some of those metrics, again, that I talked about earlier. How many people did we train? How many hours of training do we offer? What is the consumption and utilization of our training and learning resources? So that data is okay. There's nothing wrong with gathering and collecting that kind of data and doing that kind of measurement. But let's keep it in context because it is measuring operational efficiency. Where organizations struggle, continue to be challenged, is not going any further than that, right? Some organizations just sit right there in the operational efficiency. And again, there's nothing wrong with measuring operational efficiency. I think it's one link in the chain of evidence that leads to impact, but we got to go further, right? So let's measure operational efficiency. And then the second one, let's measure learning effectiveness. And I describe learning effectiveness as measuring the extent to which training and learning results in incremental knowledge, right? Results in the way in which people are using what they learn to do something different, or maybe even to think differently. So let's measure learning effectiveness as well. And then what I like to call the third link in the chain of evidence for measuring impact and results is business outcomes and performance outcomes. So that's where we continue to connect those dots to say, as a result of what people learned and as a result of what people consumed and utilized, i.e. the operational metrics, and that's why they're important, are people performing, right, differently? Is what they learned showing up day to day on the job? Is it manifesting itself in the way in which they're executing in their job and in their role? And is that manifestation of how they are performing showing up with how they're able to impact business goals, right? So those are the things that I believe we should be measuring, those three things. We should be measuring operational efficiency, learning effectiveness, and outcomes for business goals and people performance. So that's how I connect the dots, and those are the things that I think we really got to be measuring.
I just wanted to touch on your point around meetings. I mean, especially now where we're talking about an era of Zoom fatigue and people are, facing burnout from back-to-back meetings. And I find that kind of nods to a bigger topic, which is what we're seeing right now around, do we go to the office? Do we work from home? Is it hybrid? But really, I find the bigger question is it's not about where we're working, but it's how we're working. And a big part of that is synchronous and asynchronous. And it comes to the meeting point you mentioned around, am I in a meeting to hear these status updates, or could we have asynchronously shared that? So given you wrote this prior to the pandemic and all of this kind of remote work kicking off, What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on it now in terms of how prepared companies are for asynchronous work? And if they're not, what can they be doing to be more prepared for asynchronous work?
Look, I'm a massive fan of asynchronous work. Even before this, I have been, and I don't think companies are prepared enough. I think that they still believe that we need to be there for one person talking through 50 slides for 2 hours while everybody else pretends to listen, but they're actually on their email. I think that's just the absolute worst waste of energy, especially if you've got people joining from different time zones, some early in the morning, some late at night. To what? To listen to something that could have been a podcast. Really, I do think that that's a massive challenge. And I think that probably more traditional companies are still struggling with that. Also, you mentioned a very important point, though, which is that the culture that we've developed over the last 15 months has been very intense, and it's been in response to a crisis. So we've all started to work even more ridiculously hard than we used to, and probably taking up the edges of what used to be our commute instead of taking that time back from ourselves. And so actually one of the most popular and most useful, I think, chapters in the book is chapter 3, which is all about taking back control of time. And essentially, it's about stopping your time from being taken up in bad meetings and being used on email, because a study showed that after all of your meetings and emails, the average knowledge worker has about 44% of their time left in the working week. So essentially, none of us start any work until like Wednesday afternoon, which is crazy.
Yeah.
We cannot allow that. And I think that's one of the most important resets and the most important habits that we need to overcome. Stop doing what has always been done just because that's the way it's always been done. There's a couple of companies who've done really good changes like that. So, for example, Vodafone made their meeting defaults into half an hour rather than 1 hour meetings. That saves in a massive amount of time. But the problem is that still might leave you with back-to-back 10 half an hour meetings. So what Channel 4 did was they banned people from putting back-to-back meetings. So they forced a 15-minute break between every meeting.
Right.
And then they also said on Fridays, no meetings. And so lots of companies are coming up with different things like that. I mean, I think those companies are amazing for doing that. I'm not always in favor of only company-wide policies, though, because I think you need to, as a team, discuss what are you trying to achieve, who's on our team, and how do we best work together.
You've obviously been at TomTom for a while. So how have you seen OKRs change behavior in a way it didn't when you didn't kind of have OKRs, right? What difference has it made? Especially, I guess, in your kind of HR teams and talent development teams, what differences have you seen it's made?
Well, it gives us all like a North Star to work towards. And so within HR, I've seen a huge difference in just how teams work with each other, and with that one goal of, this is what we want to do for HR this year. This is what we're going to focus on. And it gives us a common language and understanding to measure our work. I think HR has always struggled with how to really quantify what we do. And this really helps that. It helps, put it down in front of everyone, and we have one thing to work towards, and we agree together that this is how we're going to try to achieve that. And then you can, and we try to have cross-functional OKRs as well, because the teams aren't really working in a bubble. The talent development team needs to work very closely with the business partners. We need to work very closely with employee relations and, on topics such as wellness. So it's all interrelated. So this gives us one vision as a team and one language about what we're trying to achieve.
And taking talent development specifically, has it changed what you measure in terms of what successful talent development looks like? I ask this because, there's a bit of a transition period where sometimes we speak to organizations who are still stuck in kind of measuring course completion and kind of time spent learning as the sole metrics of whether talent development program has been successful or not. But I'd be interested to know whether you think OKRs has kind of shifted what you would now consider as a metric that shows you whether something's working or not.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do still have key results that might measure, attendance or signups for a particular workshop that we hold. But then that's not the only measurement. We try to add in, surveys. We do lots of surveys, but also most of our HR objectives in some way have a key result related to our engagement survey.
Right.
So are you trying to increase the response or the rate, the engagement rate on this question or on this question? So we do that. We tie that in a lot to our key results, the engagement. But also there's measurements such as higher rates and turnover rates that we also can use as measurements, but we try to much more often use that direct feedback from employees in the surveys to see how well we're doing and how well they're responding to what we're doing.
I'm sure in your time, especially previously at Typeform, you've probably onboarded a bunch of new starters, and obviously recently you've been onboarded yourself. What are your thoughts on what an optimal onboarding journey should look like for a new starter, right? Because sometimes, some companies are guilty of throwing everything to you in like the kind of first week. And the truth is, we're not going to remember most of this stuff. So what do you think is kind of the traits of an optimal onboarding experience for a new starter?
Yeah, so for me, what I learned helps me to get up to speed is to know upfront what's expected. So how much, mostly in a leadership role, right? You have to balance building a team, learning the product, learning the in and out of processes and how teams operate. So I was there's something I asked early on to Pablo, my manager, what I need to focus on. From your perspective, what to expect. Not to focus, I knew, but what to expect of me in 30 days, 60 days, and start putting a plan together, how to acquire that information and balancing, right? As again, product knowledge, customers, internal teams. I've been in onboardings they are too hands off in the sense that, hey, this is a Notion page, good luck, and it's overwhelming, right? You can get lost very quickly, and okay, there are million pages, million documents. What do I prioritize? And what I enjoyed about is they have the right mix of, yes, there is the Notion page documentation, but they proactively set up meetings with each team. So in the first 2 weeks, I met with all product managers. I met with the people team, with all departments. So I got a chance to have an intro, not only meeting the person that leads that team. That's always nice. I'll put a phrase, but learning in half an hour, 45 minutes, the main topics that affect the team, and that helps again with learning knowledge. But at the same time, not feeling overwhelmed, like that's it, figure it out on your own and good luck.
and for a customer success leader, right, what do you think is the priority for you to know in the kind of first few months? Is it you need to know everything about the product? Is it knowing what the health of the customers are? What do you think is important for you to know, and what can you afford to learn as you go?
Good question. What problem do we solve? And that tackles already 2 points, our product. So knowing the basic of our product, not of every single feature, how it works in perfection, but what problems do we solve, our solution solve for our customers, and why do customers choose us against competition, right? So how well are we solving our position of our position? So that for me was very important from day one, to understand what verticals of customers we serve. Do they normally have one use case with us? have 2, 3, or 4. So again, understanding that very well, it's key for me. And with time, Belvo we are an API, is a very technical product. It will take me some time to fully understand the ins and outs. There's also a fine balance as a leader. No, you're not going to be every single day answering support tickets. We have an amazing technical support team for that. So the team is very, very well organized and supported. But understanding enough from a business perspective, what is the value we deliver and what it means winning for our customers.
And that's a wrap. Remember, all the details you need to get in touch or find any episodes that caught your attention can be found in the description. And don't forget to subscribe so that you'll be notified when Series 2 returns. Thanks, and see you soon.